Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. We talk a lot of football here on 3 and Out, but there's always something to bet on. The NBA, college hoops, hockey, sports are going full swing right now. When you sign up with Hard Rock Bet today, you could score $150 in bonus bets. You just have to place a $5 wager, and if it hits, you not only get your winnings, but you also get $150 in bonus bets. Hard Rock Sportsbook app is the only legal sportsbook whenever you're in Florida. And it's also live in Arizona, Ohio, New Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Illinois, Colorado, and coming soon for more states near you. Plus, Hard Rock Bet offers new promos every single day. So whenever you're listening, just open the app and check out what you've got on any given day of the week. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Hopefully as well as Dak Prescott, who threw about 10 touchdowns tonight, playing the Raiders. But you guys know what I need you to do. Subscribe to this channel. Hammer that subscribe button. Leave a like. Comment. You guys know the drill. We're live Monday night. We'll be back Thursday night. We got a really good game Thursday night, in theory. Bills, Texans, next Sunday night, next Monday night. Leading up to Thanksgiving. So stick with us. Subscribe to the page. Never miss anything. Obviously, podcast as well. You can subscribe to that wherever you listen. It's just me, John Middlekauff, 3 and Out Podcast, presented to you by my friends at Zone Pouches. Love these guys. And, I have a couple big takeaways from that Monday night game that we will have to dive into. Obviously, the Raiders get shellacked. And the Cowboys, Dak Prescott throws a bunch of touchdowns. Pickens looks good. And you see Jerry up there with his sons pounding his chest like he's Howie Roseman 2.0, wheeling and dealing for defensive lineman who was just crushing Geno Smith. We're definitely going to talk about some other stuff because we got some news today out of Atlanta. And a lot of people think I'm a Falcon hater. I'm not actually a big Michael Penix fan, but it looks like his season – and I would just say his future with all the injuries are in major jeopardy, and the Falcons are in complete shambles. We're basically going to look at some teams that there's a reason certain teams stay bad and the same ones stay good. Because the Jets made some news today that the Falcons coach is taking a lot of heat. Couple big news items when it comes to college football. We got Lane Kiffin sending his family, his ex-wife. His ex-wife's doing a recon for him in Florida and LSU, and James Franklin did something that I just don't think most of us can relate to, and I'm not even talking about taking the Virginia Tech job. But we'll dive into all this football talk, obviously, but first, I do have to tell you about my friends at Zone Pouches. This product contains nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical. Underage sale prohibited. And if you're as competitive as I am, you're always looking for something to help you stay dialed in. That's what I need to do on these Monday night games. I throw in one. I was talking to my scouting buddies. They say they always have one in when they're, scouting and evaluating these draft picks. So if you're looking for one, maybe a mint flavor, I need to order some dragon fruits online. And not to mention that they come with 20 pouches per can versus 15 that the other guys provide. So use the promo code, the number 3 and out 20 on NicoKick.com for 20% off at checkout. When you have a game like this, right, you're trying, like last night, the angle was pretty, kind of just speaks to you. Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, it's a pretty clear headline. That game also has huge ramifications, right? The Lions, who have been in the playoffs back-to-back years, they were in the NFC Championship 2 years ago. Last year, they were the number 2 seed. The Eagles are the defending champs. There's a lot going on last night. This game, you're looking at Dallas, who probably, if I had to guess right now, Dallas ends up going 7-9-1. And the Raiders might win 3 games. So it's like, what am I going to talk about? What is interesting about this game? And I have and know a lot of Raider fans, and I'm getting texts from diehards. I'm getting a lot of DMs. And I think it's been on the front of everyone's mind because when they hired this guy, I thought, like, we saw 2 first-year coaches for their teams this year. Obviously, Pete's been a coach for a long time, but first year with the Raiders, same thing with Brian Schottenheimer. I think the one thing that's not debatable, now the Cowboys have a long way to go, and we'll dive into kind of their roster management. Brian Schottenheimer's good with the offense. Him and Dak have a really good rapport. George Pickens has looked excellent with him. Obviously, when CD's on the field, like Brian Schottenheimer, how he'll be when the team gets better if they hit on some defensive players, only time will tell. But his skill is pretty legit. Like, he's a pretty good play caller. I'm looking at Pete Carroll, who is 74 years old. And if he makes it to next football season, will be 75. I think when you look at the Raiders, it's kind of sad. My wife is born and raised in the Bay Area, the East Bay, which would be, in theory, more Raider territory. But, she's in her early 30s. It's most people her age, and she's been around, are Niner fans. But historically, the Raiders on that side of the bridge in the 70s and in the 80s kind of owned it before they took off to L.A. And she looked at me, she's like, are the Raiders ever good? And in fairness to her, for the last 20 years, they have been awful. And they are consistently always bad. And Spytek's been on this podcast. I don't know him that well, though I know a lot of people that know him well. And clearly coming from Jason Light, I do think the guy's good at his job and will be good at his job. And obviously Tom Brady's track record playing the game speaks for itself. And now he's involved in kind of this somewhat mysterious role. Obviously, he is owns a percentage of the team, but like, how much influence does he have? And here's the other thing. Just because you're a great player doesn't mean you're some great evaluator, right? Just because you were a great quarterback doesn't mean you understand what's going to separate Ty Simpson from Lenore Sellers from Fernando Mendoza, right? Like, I would imagine there are people that do this for a living that would rank those guys better than Tom Brady might rank them. So there's a lot of moving parts there. But when they hired Pete Carroll, I thought, this is a smart move. It just will give them a guy that knows what he's doing and get the train going back on the tracks in the right direction. That doesn't mean in the next couple years making the playoffs, but just be a credible operation. And I get it's only year one, but you're watching this team. They are horrendous. They are so bad at football. I was thinking about this about 10 minutes into the game. I was like, this game, if this was on a Sunday, especially like a Sunday morning with 6 or 7 other games on, the overwhelming majority of football fans would not put this on one of their 4 boxes. And if you're a sicko like me and have multiple TVs, it would get stashed on the smaller one in a box in the corner. And after Dak threw a couple touchdowns, you wouldn't pay attention. This game is completely irrelevant. And I do think it's somewhat of a reflection of Pete Carroll. And I think we have to ask ourselves, does this make any sense? To have a guy who will be 75 years old next year on a team that we know for a fact has 2 good players, Brock Bowers and Max Crosby. I hope Ashton Genty's good. Right now, while it's impossible to tell, he currently has no impact, right? So they have 2 good players. They are in a division that is absolutely loaded with the Chiefs, the Broncos, and once the Chargers get a couple offensive linemen back, they should win double-digit every year with Jim Harbaugh. So you go, what are we doing? And I think the question is, do you fire Pete Carroll after this year? And I think the Giants taught us a good lesson. I think sometimes you want to be patient for the sake of patience, just to say, I'm not crazy. We are not flying by the seat of our pants. We're not just firing guys to fire guys. And then we've all watched football long enough. I think if you get on the internet, you see a lot is Pete Carroll washed. And I still think his passion's there. He honestly looks the same as he did 10 years ago when he was in his mid-60s physically. I would imagine his energy to attempt to do this. He had a year off and was desperate to get back in. So when I see, is he washed? Like, I think the same characteristics and standards and philosophies that were successful when he was at SC and early on in Seattle that he carried through for for over a decade. I think he's carrying those through now with the same energy and effort. I think the problem is this team needs to be torn down to the studs and completely start over. I thought they should have traded Max Crosby last year, but Pete Carroll wouldn't want to trade Max Crosby, right? Pete Carroll's 74 years old. Pete Carroll wants to have a Max Crosby. Hell, he's starting Jamal Adams at linebacker right now. I looked up. I was like, is that 33 lined up like Ray Lewis? I mean, he's starting linebacker. So I think that shows you who was pounding the table for that trade. And Pete Carroll's not in a position to do a start over. He's not in a position to do a rebuild. His mind is not wired to think like that, rightfully so. He'll be 75 years old next year. So I would say philosophically, his beliefs in football of trying to win, compete every day, and trying to win right now, when you're making moves in January, February, and March, building the team for training camp and the season, how is John Spytek going to view what he just witnessed throughout this season the same as Pete Carroll for what he will want for week one? They will not be aligned. So I think it's fair. Listen, we all make mistakes, and the Raiders feel like they make more than others. Though I think a lot of their mistakes, I've understood why they've made them when it comes to coaches recently. Like, I understood why Mark Davis hired John Gruden. He wanted some fireworks. He was trying to get a new stadium. He was trying to move. He needed a headliner. A little bit like back in the day when Jerry Jones hired Bill Parcells to get his stadium built. The 49ers did the same thing with Jim Harbaugh to get Levi Stadium built. You kind of needed a headliner. And I thought it was the right move. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened. Didn't make it through 5 years. A couple years later, he hired Josh McDaniels. Totally understood that one. He couldn't even make it through year two. This year, Pete Carroll, like, okay, just everyone take a deep breath. It's just not working. And you hire Chip Kelly, who hasn't been a good offensive coordinator in over a decade, and pay him $6 million a year. That's an insane move. So, listen, one thing about Pete Carroll you could say is, like, does he know who to hire? He's like, well, who did he bring in for his defensive coordinator? Well, he just kept the guy that Josh had brought, Patrick Graham from New England, who's really good. So that guy, he just inherited him. The one move that he had to make that was really important was the offensive coordinator. And clearly he hired a guy that's not very good at his job, and it cost him 4x what it would have cost some random dude from a Shanahan coaching tree. So it's like, why are you doing this? And one thing about Pete Carroll, Google him. He has fired a lot of coaches, especially offensive coordinators. So if Pete Carroll is able to survive, Chip Kelly will 100% be fired. I just think if you're John Spytek, you start looking at Mark Davis and Tom Brady and go, listen, this is not working out. And we might need to separate ourselves, because what we need to do, and this sucks because he's an awesome player. He tries his balls off, and he's very passionate about this brand. You know, there's only been a couple players, and I've spent a lot of time around the Raiders since I left the NFL in 2013, so for over a decade, that like truly like kind of bled silver and black, right? Like kind of like an Al Davis type, like loved the brand. And that was Derek Carr, and that's Max Crosby. Most of these other players are complete mercenaries. They do not give a shit. Khalil Mack, the moment they wouldn't sniff his demands, was like, get me out of here. Amari Cooper couldn't have got out of here fast enough. You know, Max Crosby has tattoos with the Raiders logo, obviously desperately wants to win, has ingrained himself in that community as boys with Dana White. Like, he's a big Vegas guy. But it's completely pointless to have him on the team. But Pete Carroll would never want to give that up, because that's not going to help him out in 2026. But if you're Spytek, I think you have to look at it like this is stupid. This is a joke. Like, our team is going nowhere, and we have two players of value, and that's him and Brock Bowers. And I think you could justify trading them both next offseason, because your team is not a year away from being 2 years away. I think we have to acknowledge that as well, because you look around the quarterback class, like that's what Dallas has. You know, Dallas has multiple first-round picks, and they have 3 first-round picks the next 2 years. And now they have some defensive tackles. They need to hit on some defensive players. But they have a quarterback who is more than competent. Does he have some flaws? Yes. But he's a real quarterback. And they've invested a ton of draft capital in their offensive line. And I think they're going to be pressured to have to keep George Pickens to go with CeeDee Lamb. And like their offense, Ferguson's under contract, is really good, is really explosive. They need to build that defense, which, let's be real, if they do a good job this offseason, they probably could flip it really quick. They are not that far away. You never know when you draft a guy how impactful he will be as a rookie. Some guys are better than others. I'll use Khalil Mack as an example. He was pretty raw coming from Buffalo as a rookie. I think he only had 4.5 sacks. You could see what the future looked like, right? But it was not like he wasn't ready to be a Pro Bowl or All Pro. So it's hard. But if they do nail some picks and invest some, I would say, free agency capital into the defensive side of the ball, I think Dallas Cowboys could be a playoff team in 2026. And then I think we would really judge Brian Schottenheimer a little bit differently than we are right now. I don't see the Raiders have any chance to be a 6-win team next year. They have no talent. Their quarterback, I mean, if you don't have an offensive line, Geno's got no shot. The running back, like one thing I will disagree with the organization of, I was never on board with taking that guy number 6 overall. I couldn't have done it. And they did. Now, is he as bad as he's looked? I don't know. Is that a reflection of Chip Kelly? I don't know. I mean, I'm watching Brian Schottenheimer make George Pickens look like he's Randy Moss. So it's like part of being a great offensive coordinator. Like at the end of the day, if you're a defensive end, I can't make you look like Myles Garrett or Khalil Mack. You either have the skills to bend the edge, to bull rush, or you don't. Like Quinnen Williams has skills at defensive tackle that all the guys on the Raiders just do not possess. There is no coaching up defensive players on the line of scrimmage, right? There's no coaching up a corner in man-to-man coverage. Like you can either run a 4-4 flat or you can't. And if you can't, you're going to get smoked by a lot of wide receivers. But I can manipulate offense. I can scheme guys open. I just saw this clip of Ben Johnson. They asked him if he's going to start like integrating more 50-50 concepts to his offense and throw some 50-50 balls to his wide receivers. He's like, I don't know if you've watched me in Detroit, but I don't run 50-50 balls. I don't like that. I like to scheme guys open. What he's saying is like, I can manipulate this thing. I'm not going to ask a guy, like we don't have Randy Moss on this team, to just be in a one-on-one situation, just tell Caleb, throw it up. The Cowboys do some of that, but they have great 50-50 wide receivers. But his point was like, our skill with me running this thing is I'm manipulating the defense. And that's what a good offensive coordinator does. And when you have a guy, in theory, with Genti's skill set, like you should be able to manipulate some stuff. They don't even try. And I just think the Raiders coaching staff is just completely broken. And if I'm Spytek, I try to do this in a credible way, not trying to backstab anybody, but I'm trying to separate from Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly immediately because that is, those two guys are a sinking ship. And like I said with Dallas, I mean, they are a good offseason away from being a 10-11 win team next year. Because Brian Schottenheimer, once upon a time, was viewed as one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. And it just kind of went sideways on him. He kind of flew under the radar. And is he a great head coach? We'll only know with a better team. But he clearly is a pretty good offensive coordinator. And he clearly has a fantastic relationship, rapport, and understanding of him and Dak are on the same page. And I also give you credit when you're an offensive coach. Like, can he handle some personalities? Because not everyone's a choir boy in the NFL. We're not teaching people life lessons here. And if you can produce, we're going to have a spot for you, especially in Dallas, where their owner is as open-minded and as liberal with character issues as anyone. And let's face it, George Pickens drove Mike Tomlin insane. And they couldn't get rid of him fast enough, which is kind of ironic that they got rid of him for DK Metcalf. Be one thing, it's like, yeah, we just traded him for, whoever, just some Terry McLaurin. You're like, I can see that. Like, DK Metcalf's a little bit of a wild card, too. Didn't he, lead the league in penalties the previous year? Had a bunch of personal fouls? Doesn't he have some issues, too, with his play? And I'm watching George Pickens, who just feels every single time I watch the Cowboys, is just playing his tail off. Like, he plays really hard. And that was a knock on him. It's like, yeah, he kind of goes through the motions. Not that into it. I'm watching a guy breaking tackles, looking to make plays, running hard. He's just pretty special talent. Now, I think you're always nervous, guy in a contract year. How much money do you have to give him? He's not getting like CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase money, but it's not like he's making $5 million. So anytime you pay a guy, are you going to get that consistent effort? And maybe you feel as long as you got Dak, you got the infrastructure, the young offensive linemen who, obviously look better against the Raiders. I'm trying to think. A couple weeks ago, they played someone and they were getting someone done. Oh, the Cardinals. Walter Nolan and Sweat made them look bad. So now Sweat's actually having a really good year. I think he like second in the league in sacks, or maybe that's us. Brian Burns has 13 behind Myles Garrett. I think Sweat has 9, but Sweat's a pretty high end player. Obviously Nolan, very talented guy, but I do think the Cowboys are not quite the laughing stock that, and I'm probably guilty of this too, that we all made them out to be. They got a lot going for them, and now the pressures in the draft, where let's face it, they've been pretty good. Like the problem for the Cowboys has not been, if they could just draft better. Like drafting hasn't been their issue. I mean, it really hasn't. It's really been coaching. It's been, I mean, coaching's been a huge issue, and Jerry Jones meddling in the situation that everything that's going on in Dallas. Hell, the big article that came around last year was players complaining about fans getting VIP tours in the facility. It's like, I'm just trying to watch Eagles tape, and I got Billy from Section 7 asking for my autograph on a Tuesday afternoon eating a hot dog. It's like, yeah, it's not normal. Even though, Dak just says he kind of deals with it. I do think if I could buy a little stock, I might buy a little stock in Dallas. And part of it, too, is their division isn't that hard. The Eagles got some offensive issues. We have no clue just over the next couple of years if it's Kevin Patola, even if they go to the NFC Championship, hell, they go to the Super Bowl. Like, is he just going to be their offensive coordinator? This is how their offense is going to look? Because A.J. Brown's not going to be on the team next year. Now, their defense is really good, but Washington is in complete shambles. And the Giants, I mean, don't even have a coach. I mean, you got Cam Scadaboo at WWE Raw tonight in a cast. You got Brian Burns, who was benched at the start of the game, there with him. The Giants right now have a bunch of players, and I don't blame them for going. Big Dom was there with Cooper DeJean. The Giants feel a little bit like, they got the substitute teacher, right? Their parents went on a cruise, and they got the pushover babysitter. Those cats are living well. It's like, you guys are losing a lot of games, but they're living like they're a 7-win team. So you look at the Cowboys, would not shock me at all next year if they are just in the mix. A lot of pressure is going to be on these draft picks. You could also manipulate them. Like if you're Dallas and Max Crosby is available, hey, we'll give you a 1 and 2 twos for him. Like what would it take to get him? Right? I would imagine Jerry Jones, because again, part of the reason Jerry traded for Quinnen Williams, they need defensive tackle help. But it's like, well, he traded his one in 2027. Jerry's going to be like 87 years old. You think Jerry's worried about that first round pick, what he's doing like year 4? He's like, the likelihood of me being around is slim to none. So there's not much to break down in this game. Besides, like, I do think there's some big picture stuff with these two franchises that are kind of interesting. And I do think, Dallas is humming on offense. Watching Dallas and Schottenheimer against Fangio and kind of this new revamped Eagles defense next week, going to be pretty interesting. And here's the thing, and this was kind of an indictment on the Raiders. Like if you can't get right against Dallas's defense, and I know adding Quinnen Williams helps obviously a little bit, and Quinnen Williams could eat a little against Philadelphia. I mean, their guard center guard situation is not great, but if you're Jalen and you're AJ and you're Devontae, like, can we score like 3 touchdowns against these guys? Can we have some explosive plays? Because if you can't do it against these guys, it is going to be a little alarming if you're an Eagles team, like heading into the playoffs, where obviously you're going to play some better defenses. So something to keep an eye on. But congrats to the Cowboys on getting a big Monday Night Football win, and I do think Pete Carroll can chomp that gum and walk with those white New Balances and have a big smile and eat a bunch of kale. But this thing is not going well at all. I wrote down, why do bad teams stay bad? And I have 3 different examples here. I'm going to start with the Atlanta Falcons, who I was out on again this year. Now, I never believed that they were going to be this bad, because I do think there's a chance that they're like 4-13. They have a chance now to completely unravel. It could get really, really ugly. Reports today that Michael Penix might have re-tore his ACL, which I think would be on either knee, because he's torn them both, would be the second time on a knee. and would obviously be out for this season, and it would impact his offseason, and it would be his fourth season-ending injury. I think in the last year was his in the last 8 years. So four season-ending injuries in 8 years. And I was texting around to some NFL buddies today, and I obviously liked Michael Penix coming out. I was a Michael Penix fan. Most of my friends in the NFL were not. They did not view him as a first round pick. I'm texting around today. He thought, a buddy of mine, that there were several draft boards where he just would have been off based on injuries alone. When you play 6 years in college, and three of those, actually, I think four of those, because a couple were like shoulders, that you can't finish the season, alarms and red flags go off. And some of that's, predicated on what the doctors are telling you, but that gives teams, that scares teams, because guys with a lot of injury history, even though the past doesn't always predict the future, teams get very rattled by that. And obviously, a lot of teams did not view him highly like the Falcons did. But the Falcons had a stretch where they signed Kirk Cousins and drafted this guy in basically 30 days. And it has destroyed their franchise because, one, Cousins signings, one of the worst in recent memories. And Penix, even before he was injured, I think we have to acknowledge, has not been a very good player. So when you ruin the quarterback position and you're kind of cocky about it, it's going to get you in trouble. I do think Atlanta, the craziest part, and this saddens me to say, is their downfall is actually benefiting the Los Angeles Rams. And I do think there had to be a moment in the draft room where Sean McVay, who's, I think, I don't know if it was his best man in his wedding, but one of his best friends is Raheem Morris. When they got on the phone with Les Snead and the Rams and said, we will offer you a 2026 first round pick for James Pierce. And the Rams should have said, Raheem, we can't let you do that. That is, we would fire you for doing that. So we just, as your good friend, we would advise you to rethink this idea. And they did not do that. And they took their first round pick. And right now, the Rams, a day after beating Seattle in first place in the NFC West and looking like a team, I mean, if they play like they did yesterday, would have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Also own the 8th pick in the draft as we sit here on November 17th. Let me repeat. The Los Angeles Rams own the 8th pick in the draft. But here's the thing. How are the Atlanta Falcons going to win any games? We saw Kirk Cousins earlier this season. It's completely over. Penix is gone. Drake London is now banged up. They are screwed. So, and now their defense isn't good. I mean, Bryce Young just threw for like 700 yards against them in an overtime victory. I think the Atlanta Falcons are a great example. You look around the NFL, even like a team like the Lions right now that have a bad loss, or the Packers that have got, they are in such a different universe than teams like Atlanta. Like, I will just, if these were all stocks, you would just short Atlanta every single year. And that move that they made, trading a future first round pick, trading up from the 30s to the 20s, whether I agree or disagree with taking Travis Hunter, number 2 overall, because you think he can be a two-way player, even though no one's ever been a two-way player, and that includes his former coach, who is the greatest athlete, arguably, of all time in the NFL, and could just sparingly play on offense, it's, at least you're going from 5 to 2. Like, that's the cost of doing business. When you trade back into the 20s to give a future first-round pick, it is honestly like some of the most reckless draft behavior we have ever seen. And it blew up in their face like immediately. If I just think if you're the Rams, you're kind of downplaying it, but I mean, you got that in your back pocket. Les Snead is sending his scouts, like scouting all the real high end guys. Typically, you're watching whoever the quote unquote, the Caleb Downs or the defensive lineman from Ohio State or Miami, and you run into someone like the Eagles or the Ravens or the Chiefs. Like, you're not drafting these guys. Les Snead's like top scouts just standing right next to the dudes from the Giants and the Titans. Like, yeah, we might get this guy too. It's like, it's just got to be an incredible feeling right now for Les Snead that was always F them picks, and now he's going to have a top 10 pick. Pretty insane. And speaking of why teams or bad teams stay bad, The New York Jets, I saw a headline today that Tyrod Taylor will be their starting quarterback this year. I saw one of the New York Jets, I think it might have been Rich Samini, who's the beat reporter, covers the team closely for ESPN. He tweeted out some numbers that said if this offseason the Jets cut Justin Fields, so the dead money they will have from that contract, and if you combine that with the dead money that they will have for Aaron Rodgers' contract next year in 2026, will combine for $57 million in dead cap. Somewhat understand the Aaron Rodgers thing. We probably all would have made the Aaron Rodgers trade. He gave them, remember, a massive discount when he redid his contract. It kind of is what it is. That was a move that 99% of people would have made given their options, and it blew up in their face. The Justin Fields move did not need to happen. They did not need to do that. Why? Because we all knew that he's not a very good quarterback. Great guy. Unreal athlete. Awful quarterback. And you're benching a guy that you gave. It's one thing, listen, sometimes, we gave this guy 1 year, $10 million to be the backup, and he wasn't any good. It's happened to Andy Dalton before. Flacco, I know he's kind of good now. A couple years ago, he wasn't that good. Like, sometimes you give backups 1 year, $7 million, and he's just not any good. To give this guy 2 years, $40 million is about as crazy as you get, in the free agent market. It really is. And this, you look at the Jets, you look at the Falcons, they have no clue what they're doing when it comes to quarterback. They really do not. Remember, the Falcons, before Matt Ryan, like, what was going on there? Obviously, Michael Vick went to jail, but, like, they drafted Michael Vick number 1 overall. They don't know what they're doing. And if you look since, it's like they've had Desmond Ritter, give Cousins, it's like Heineke. These franchises, bad franchises, are where quarterbacks go to die. And the Arizona Cardinals are a good example of, like, Jonathan Gannon and Monty. I always screw up the guy's last name, but the GM of the Cardinals. I actually think they're not bad. But they hitched their wagon, Monty Osenfort, former Patriot guy. They hitched their wagon to a team that had Kyler Murray under one of the craziest contracts we've ever seen. I mean, the contract, they felt so good about the contract, they had to put a clause in there that he couldn't play video games, which has never happened before and will never happen again when it comes to a quarterback. And obviously, when they accepted the job, which I understand there are only 32 of them, and there aren't 32 of them because most, like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the 49ers, like a lot of these jobs don't ever come open, right? So it's really the same 10-ish jobs that kind of recycle, right? The Jets, the Giants, the Cardinals, the Jags. So you're going to hit your wagon to a bad NFL job, even though it's like not that bad. My wife's in real estate. When Jonathan Gannon bought his house down, closer to Tempe, I remember Googling, or, she had all the, she has these programs like, it's pretty big mortgage he's taking out. Business must be booming. So you make a lot of money. And I think Jonathan Gannon actually is pretty solid. But the team now is just a complete disaster. They have no quarterback, right? Think about this. The guy that they inherited on a max contract got benched for Jacoby Brissett, who the last 2 weeks they've played Seattle and the 49ers, and they lost 44-22 and 41-22. And neither game was that close. Like, those scores don't indicate what we witnessed. And they're all going to get fired. And it's all because they took a job with a guy on a massive contract that's not a max player. And you see this around the league. When you sign these guys to these huge contracts and they're not max players, you have immediate problems. And guys' jobs are lost. And I would say this about if all these guys get fired, and maybe the GM, kind of like the Giants, keeps their job, which is always kind of crazy, but it happens more often than both guys getting blown out. Is this a terrible gig? It really is. I mean, you're in a division with Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and Mike McDonald. You have no chance. Your owner's a clown. I mean, he really is. The ownership has no clue. He really doesn't. Like, the best thing that could ever happen to the Arizona Cardinals would be the Bidwell family selling the team. I would say the same thing. Mark Davis's mom, Carol, who's Al's wife, just died. I would say the best thing that could ever happen to the Raiders is the same thing. Just sell the team. Look at the Bus family. Dr. Bus was extremely successful, and then he gave it to his incompetent kids, and the franchise became a laughingstock. And they got lucky. They were in a great area, and LeBron just wanted to play there. Because if LeBron didn't want to play there, this franchise over the last decade plus, and every Laker fan would acknowledge this, would have been like the Sacramento Kings. And they got really lucky that however this played out, and I've read some different articles, listened to different podcasts with the children, that they sold it to the Dodger Group because now they got a chance. They got real ownership that knows what they're doing. And I think all these places, you know, Arthur Blank, clearly when he was younger, pretty high level business guy, made his fortune himself, but he hired the right guy once upon a time in Thomas Dimitrov. And then ever since, I don't know if it was pressure to fire him. Obviously, they had a couple bad years, and you start hiring the wrong people. The owner gets way older. He's way richer. He's just out of touch, and the franchise just falls apart. Obviously Woody Johnson and they got no clue what they're doing. The Bidwell family, no clue what they're doing. I think Mark Davis's heart's in the right place. He's trying, but it's just the same shit every year. It's crazy. It's honestly, I feel bad for the fans. Uh, Really quick, I didn't really talk yesterday about the performance of Josh Allen, but talk about a guy that was zoned in. I do think we have to all universally agree that the best quarterback, like the best quarterback in the NFL, is Josh Allen right now. We saw Mahomes play Denver, and honestly, just Mahomes throughout the season. Like Josh Allen's a better player. But the thing is, relative to some of his counterparts, like even watching Bo Nix in Denver, that team's loaded. Josh Allen, like who's Josh Allen's second best teammate? Cook, Dawkins, the left tackle. Like who's like? Could you name his five best teammates? He doesn't have some loaded roster. That's well established. But I don't remember a guy. Part of what made like Cam Newton so special was physically there was never anyone quite like him. And I do think he's the greatest physical running quarterback we've ever seen. But as he got older, it took a toll on him, messed up his shoulder. And by the end of his career, like he used to have a howitzer. While he never was that accurate, he had this massive arm. It's why when he had games where he was in a rhythm and he was on, he could look like the most dominant player in the NFL. Obviously, he had the one great season, he won the MVP. But throughout his career, he would just have individual games where he could go toe to toe with anybody and just completely take over the game. And a lot of that had to do with like physically, you could just run these quarterback runs for him that were just simply unstoppable. And Josh Allen has that. The thing that he also has is he can just turn into a thrower like he's Dan Marino, John Elway, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. And he carries the franchise. And that was a moment in that game against the Bucks. I mean, there were a couple times where it's like the Bucks would score. It's like, God, the Bills' back's a little against the wall. It did feel like that was the tipping point for their season if they lost. If they lose that game, it does feel like everything could unravel. Sean McDermott had to inactivate Keon Coleman because he slept through a morning meeting on Friday. And I told Coward this when I saw that, kind of showed you. I think if they were 8-1 and just rolling like we expected them to do at the beginning of the season, I don't think he's inactive. I think that's your classic. You call him into your room, you kind of talk to him. Maybe you bench him for a series or two, or maybe the first quarter. You kind of let the locker room handle it, and you just kind of move on. But when all of a sudden you're getting your ass kicked by the Miami Dolphins, you kind of got to draw a line in the sand. You have to show Josh Allen. You have to show, Cook and Dawkins and some of your core guys, like, we're not going to tolerate this. I got your back because you guys are all working so hard. But then I think Josh kind of sees that and go, God, we got some of these young guys we're bringing in, don't quite know what's going on and aren't focused enough. And all of a sudden we're playing the Bucks, who have a bunch of injuries, at home where we never lose, and they're scoring. They got some running back most of us have never heard of unless you're a Syracuse alum, and all of a sudden Sean Tucker's looking like he's Walter Payton meets LaDainian Tomlinson. You're like, who is this guy? Like, the Bills are going to lose. And then Josh Allen just simply said, no, under no circumstances are we losing. And I've said this forever. the thing I like most about professional sports. Like undrafted free agent stories are cool. They're cute. Like I watch for Tom Brady. I watch for CeeDee Lamb. I watch for Josh Allen. And that performance the other night was just, it was electric, dominant, and it had to happen because without him, I think all of a sudden their season could just start heading toward the toilet. And he just refused, to even give that, like it wasn't even an option. He just simply said not on my watch. So props to Josh Allen. Couple quick college things. I want to start with this. James Franklin was announced as the head coach for the Virginia Tech Hokies this afternoon, maybe an hour or two before the Monday Night Football game. And signs, Virginia Tech has been desperately trying to sign him. They've been making offers. It felt like James Franklin was kind of, waiting to see what else popped, what his other options were. I do think he would have other options, but he chose, a team in the ACC, which path to the playoffs and just to the conference championship is clearly easier than the one he just had, where you had to beat Ohio State and now Oregon. And if Michigan's good, and especially the SEC, if he had taken the Auburn job or the Arkansas job, where you have to deal with Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, or LSU, whoever is really good, obviously tougher pass. But part of the story was that Penn State owed him $49 million. $49 million. And to facilitate this move, he gave them back $40 million. He negotiated a $9 million buyout to facilitate this move to Virginia Tech, where obviously he's going to be making millions of dollars. The contract details are not yet out. Let's just assume $6, $7, $8 million, whatever. But Penn State was going to, no matter what, have to pay him $49 million. And I try to give, and most people have, I think, and I was listening to this Charlie Munger book at the gym when I was doing some cardio, and he thought the number one key to success, whatever you do, find what you're passionate about and gravitate toward an industry that revolves around your passion, because the point of difference you will have of just working harder, because it won't feel like work at times, and you will just go above and beyond when you really like what you do. And these coaches, that I can't imagine, I don't know any human beings in the real world that would ever facilitate $40 million to give back to keep working when you would be paid $50 million not to work. But that's what happens. Now, obviously, his financial situation, he's already made millions upon millions of dollars at Penn State. So money is not changing the way he lives, and he's going to continue to make millions. But I don't believe many human beings would do that. I just simply don't. And I often think if I was in those shoes, no matter how passionate I was about my next project, like, I just, and when he went on College Game Day, whatever, a month ago, and I thought it was, I don't know. I mean, it's part of his persona, being a little bit of a bullshitter, being a little bit like of a politician. I mean, that's why he's such a great recruiter. He's got a big personality. But I think some people label him as a little fake or whatever. And he went on game day and he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but like, my fire burns as strong as it ever has. And I want in, and I want in now. I can't wait to coach again. I thought, he's just saying the right things. He was not BSing, because he jumped right back in. And my first take is, is Virginia Tech a good job? I mean, that place has been abysmal over the last decade plus. So to not only take a job, but to give $40 million back to go to a place that has been kind of embarrassingly bad, and to try to prove yourself, I got to give you respect, because I can't imagine myself. I can't imagine most people in my life. It's like, bro, I probably would have gone to the beach. Even if I eventually got back in a year or two, I'm definitely taking a year off. It being paid $9-10 million to do nothing, like that's, to me, that's the American dream. But clearly, the American dream to James Franklin is coaching the Hokies against like NC State. So props to him. And then there's Lane Kiffin, and we'll end on this. I think a lot of people in the SEC think Lane has kind of jumped the shark of now starting to toy with Ole Miss. And I would imagine most people that cover college football are going to have the messaging of, we think Lane is gone. My overall take in these situations, because like, oh, this is Lane messing with someone again, or this is Lane about to leave right when he's about to make the playoffs. I think it's easy for a lot of people. In the thing with football, especially if you become a great coach, right? We say this all the time about players, like, hey, their shelf life's short. Like the average NFL career is 3 or 4 years. Even if you're a great player in the NFL, maybe it's 11-year career, right? You do not get to play for 35 years, but you do as a coach. And you never know how powerful your quote unquote brand or your star is gonna how bright it's gonna be. And right now, Lane Kiffin can't be any hotter. And he also has the experience of like, I've been the lowest. I have been the guy when I got fired at the tarmac that everyone thought was the biggest clown in the country, that was unhirable. And now I have LSU and Florida and probably some NFL teams lined up for my services. So all you guys going, this is not right. How am I supposed to handle this? There are certain situations in life that are just not easy to handle. It's just not. Even if it is the right move, even if it is like, hey, honey, this is not working out. We probably need to take a break. Well, when you finally get a divorce, it's usually pretty ugly, right? Like anyone that's ever been in a position of management that's had to fire someone or been fired, these situations are messy. Just like Lane Kiffin, like, listen, I don't even know if I want to leave Ole Miss, but wouldn't it be prudent to, I don't know, have my family and myself just look at LSU? What does the LSU Tigers have to offer? What does the University of Florida have to offer? It's so easy for everyone to say, it's like, you're in the playoffs at Ole Miss. Why would you want to leave? Well, you probably have never had multiple universities that are willing to pay you $80 to $100 million that historically have been viewed as light year better jobs. Now, that might not be the case anymore. But my point is, I see a lot of people being very critical of Lane in this situation. And historically, he's brought a lot of this on himself. I don't think there's an easy way to handle this, because I do think he's somewhat obligated, given this opportunity, to at least sniff around, at least dip his toe in the water and just see what else is out there, right? Because you could argue that this is as good as it gets at Ole Miss. It will never get better than this. Literally, it never has. They never had back-to-back years of 10 plus wins. Definitely have never had 3 straight years of 10 plus wins, which they have right now. Now, what's going to suck is that if he does, and this stuff gets out, especially, I mean, it got out today. He flew his ex-wife and his brother's wife and some of their kids were in LSU. I think yesterday they were in Florida. So they're clearly, playing the field a little bit. And if I was a betting man, I would imagine he leaves. I would guess, if I had to take an educated guess, I would guess that he's at the University of Florida. I don't know the date, but I also have seen a lot of this. Like, Ole Miss is going to give him an ultimatum, a deadline, and if he doesn't sign it, they might not let him coach in the playoffs, where it feels inevitable when he beats Mississippi State here in a couple weeks. I actually think that's kind of crazy. Like, you got into business with this guy for a reason. Just a couple years ago, he stayed loyal to you instead of leaving for Auburn, which I think historically every single coach alive would leave Ole Miss for Auburn. If I was Ole Miss, and maybe it's easy for me to say thousands of miles away in an office in Scottsdale, like, I think I would let him coach. This is not 2012. All these guys are on year-to-year contracts. Your players, your coaches, this is kind of a different world where it's just kind of driven by a mercenary mindset. And it's been a big part of Ole Miss's success. Part of the reason Lane Kiffin is crushed is because of the portal. Isn't his nickname the Portal King? So it's like his running back that he just handed his belt to when they beat Florida and did the belt to ass. You know where that player was last year? Missouri. So, I mean, his starting quarterback is from Ferris State. College football, this isn't 1978, Barry Switzer and Tom Osborne and Bobby Bowden. Those days are done. You're not spending 4 or 5 years with the same coaches, the same players. This is a mercenary sport. And Lane Kiffin's kind of treating it like it is, like the players treat him, like he treats the players. That is the world we're in. I don't think we will ever see a situation, even like Nick, 17 years someplace. Kirby's on year 10. Does he have 10 more? If you said right now, John, would you bet $10,000? Does Kirby coach 10 more years at Georgia? I would bet against it. I would bet against it. Not because it's not going well. He's kicking ass and taking names, but it's not usually the way things work. It really isn't. Hell, Nick Saban, even in the peak of the Bama dynasty, almost went to Texas. Like I think there were reports he was really close to accepting at the time was like 10 years, $100 million offer. I forget. This is probably like 2016, 15, 17 range. Um, and I think some people say he verbally accepted, and then he kind of got cold feet and stayed with Alabama, and the rest is history. But that's usually the way these guys are wired. So I just think a lot of people are shitting on Lane. There's no easy way to handle these situations. But I think it's so easy for those of us that have never been in a situation where you are the number one guy in your industry. Think about that. You are the number one guy in your industry. It's like you are the Tom Brady. You all are the Michael Jackson. You are pick the industry. You are the Bezos. You are the number one AI coder that they're all lined up to give $500 million to. That's usually one person. And Lane Kiffin is sitting in that seat right now. So there's no easy way to navigate it, and I can't watch the way this all plays out. So we'll end on that. Have a great night. See everyone later, and talk to you soon.